Can you make sense of suffering in the world? Presumably this question is being asked from a religious perspective. If there's God, how's there suffering? I'm going to give a very brief approach, but there's obviously enormous amounts said, including entire biblical books dedicated to the question. But often the question is really many, many sub-questions. But very, very broadly, good things and bad things are always dependent on the context. There's no act that's intrinsically good. Sticking a knife through somebody's body is bad if a person's trying to kill an innocent person. Good if they're a surgeon on an operating theatre. Even potentially killing somebody who's about to shoot lots of other people, and the only way to stop them is by shooting them, could be good too. So context is always the key. We experience this different context when adults deal with children. A child may be running into the road if they're 3 years old or 4 years old, and a toy or ball or something's gone into the road, and from their perspective emotionally it's like, oh my goodness, this is my life, my love, equivalent to all our friends and family is there, I need to rescue it. They don't really have a cognizance of the danger of what's going on in the road, and an adult may be holding them back, and the child will be watching the whole emotional world being destroyed in front of them, and the child's thinking this is the worst thing that could happen, and the adult's it thinks it's the best thing, I'm saving their life and I'll replace the ball. And the gap between the perspectives is so big. The child saying, why do bad things happen to good people? Why is my loving, powerful adult relative doing this to me? And the gap in perspective means they can't even explain to that adult can't even explain to the child why this is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So if we do believe in an infinite loving creator, like this question is premised on, if there is this infinite loving creator, how could the bad things happen? Well, if we believe in an infinite loving creator, infinite means looking at the whole of history from the beginning of the universe to its end, looking at the interconnectedness matrix of all the consequence of every single action, looking at belief in the possibility of life after death and perhaps reincarnation or resurrection, all these sorts of things that will be part of this vision of things. And then within there, the notion that we, who might pop into the world for a few decades and know a small slice of the world, would then say, oh, this thing clearly is against God's plan. I mean, this is a terrible thing. God clearly wouldn't want this to happen. How on earth would we know that? Now, that doesn't mean there aren't painful things in this world. There certainly are. And the Mishnaic ancient rabbinic sources say, just because we know that or believe from a Jewish perspective everything's for the good, doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't cry when bad things happen, because they're painful. Some things feel like this is not the way, ultimately the world should be. And perhaps that's true. In the journey through history, there'll be things that are painful along the way. And we're meant to, especially when we see other people in pain or even ourselves in pain, cry and experience that. And a big part of what we're meant to do with that pain is say, I want to help produce a history where all that pain's gone. The ultimate vision of things is a world where all of that pain's gone and where all the things that hurt are gone. But it doesn't mean that along the way things that hurt aren't actually for a greater good and aren't actually part of the solution and aren't actually part of something that when we do get to the end and when all those who've died are brought back and when we look at the whole thing again, it will look completely differently. And what are we meant to do about it? Be there for ourselves and others when they're in pain, and then commit our lives to doing all that we can to ensure that in the long run, when we get to the end, the painful things will be gone and we'll be able to have the perfect godly world that we all dream of.